Okay. Looks like we are streaming properly. And then I have to mute you all, which I haven't done so far. Okay, you are all muted. And this. Okay, there we go. Hopefully the internet works better today. Okay, let's chant a little bit. Okay, Sri Radhagastava. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Harune Mandala Maite Harune Mandala Maite Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jaya Madhava Tambu Tabu Rate Vardana Vese Atinis Kuta Brinda Vipine She Tambu Tabu Rate Vardana Vese Atinis Kuta Brinda Vipine She Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe Navashashi Leke Lalita Saki Guna Ramita Vishake Shapanutare Navashashi Leke Lalita Saki Guna Ramita Vishake Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Karuna Bharate Sanata Sanatana Vanita Shite Karuna Karuna Bharate Sanata Sanatana Vanita Shite Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Taruni Mandala Mahite Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Namaste Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parikacharya Osatara Satashi Shimad. His Divine Grace Abhaya Chananada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Hridas Thakur Ki Jai. Param Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Radhakrishna Gopikapanath Sayam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavanam Ki Jai. Mathuram Ki Jai. Jagannath Swami Ki Jai. Yamunamaya Ki Jai. Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharani Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deja Tarani. So, Om Ganad Timidanda Shah Gananjana Shlakya Chakshur Un Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So we are reading from the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta, Madhya Lila, chapter 12, and we are reading about the cleansing of the Gundicha temple. Let me just. All right, so. Okay. So we are ready to go. So, Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. So we are reading from a part of this chapter that deals with the devotees feasting and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanting to eat very simply as a sannyasi, but the devotees insisting that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu take opulent prasadam, because sannyasis are supposed to eat very simply, but Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was forced, especially by Jagadananda Pandit, who is Satyabhama Krishna Lila, and Jagadananda could get very angry, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to avoid Jagadananda getting angry. So his anger is the anger of love, not the anger of frustration and lust. As we hear in the Bhagavad Gita, that anger comes from what? Jayato vishakapumsam sangos teshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama kama krodha pajayate. Anger comes when you contemplate sense objects. Ooh. You become attached to them. And then you become lusty. And then you become angry. Jayato vishakapumsam. Vishya, the sense object. Sangos tesho pajayate. You become very attached to them after contemplating them. You obsess on them. Sangat sanjayate kama. And you really want it. That's lust. Kama krodha vijayate. And then that kama gives birth to anger because it's not satisfied. Okay? And so, therefore, sannyasi is supposed to eat very, very simple. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was forced by the anger or the threatened anger of Jagadananda Pandit. But that anger is actually out of love. Just like sometimes, let me give you a practical example in this world. Like a mother gets angry when her child, let's say, crosses the street and doesn't look both ways or doesn't have someone's hand that they're holding because they're in anxiety. It's out of love. So anger could be out of love too. It's not necessarily a symptom of frustrated desire. Try to remember that. But in most cases in this world, it is a symptom of frustration because you can't get no satisfaction, as the song goes. Okay, let's continue. Sarvabhaume Prabhu Vasana Chaina Vamma Pashe Dui Bhaktira Sneha Deki Sarvabhauma Hase. The Lord made Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya sit on his left side, and when Sarvabhauma saw the behavior of Swarup Damodar Jagadananda, he smiled. In other words, he saw that they were forcing Lord Caitanya to eat. Even though he didn't want to eat opulent foodstuffs, he just wanted to have very simple things. And actually, that's the rule for a sannyasi. Sannyasi should not eat opulent foodstuffs. Prabhupada said, the Mahaprasadam, that is the opulent food that comes off the altar after it's being offered to the deity, is meant for the grahastas, not for the brahmacharis or the sannyasis. And we find that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he took the prasadam many times, he would mix all the different varieties of prasadam together. In other words, the sweets, the sour things, the fried things, the boiled things, mix them all together. Why would he do that? So setting an example is the whole concept of trying to enjoy one's senses is not appropriate for a sannyasi. But to honor prasadam is very appropriate. So of course, none of you should do that. It's not a good idea. You all need tasty prasadam. And Prabhupada didn't do it. Prabhupada is our acharya. So many times people look at what past acharyas or spiritual masters did and said, I should do that. No way, Jose. You should not do that. You should do what Srila Prabhupada instructed us to do. Take the priorities of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada is our acharya. Of course, we also have Rupa Goswami and other people, not just people, pure devotees, as our acharyas, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, etc., Lord Nityananda, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami. But as far as our behavior in the Krishna conscious movement, or our austerities, we follow what Prabhupada did, and we take Prabhupada's priorities. That's important. Okay. Sarvabhaume Dehana Prabhu Prasada Uttama Sneha Karibara Bara Karana Bhojana. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also wanted to offer Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya first class food. Therefore, out of affection, he had the servers put first class food on his plate again and again. Gopinathacharya Uttama Mahaprasadani Sarvabhauma Diya Kahe Samadurabani. Gopinathacharya also brought first class food and offered it to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya while speaking sweet words. Kahan Bhattacharya Purva Jara Vyavahara Kahane Paramananda Karaha Vichara. After serving the Bhattacharya with first class prasadam, Gopinathacharya said, just consider what the Bhattacharya's previous mundane behavior was. Just consider how at present he is enjoying transcendental bliss. So this is the description of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, whose pastime was to make believe he was a smarta Brahmin. Actually, he is the priest of the demigods. Oh my God, Brahaspati, an incarnation of Brahaspati. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was previously a smarta Brahmana. That is one who strictly follows the Vedic principles on the mundane platform. So that means smarta doesn't mean smart. It means there's someone who's really into the rituals. All these different rituals, keep the fire burning all the time, uh, the Sanja rituals. I mean, incredible amount of rituals that people would do. Anyway, without really understanding the purpose of them, or even if they understood the purpose was something either mundane, material upliftment, or the purpose was, let's say, impersonalism, which was the case with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, which is also mundane. On the mundane platform, one cannot believe the Prasadam is transcendental, that Govinda is the original form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or that a Vaishnava is a liberated person. These transcendental considerations are out of the ordinary Vedic scholar's jurisdiction. Most Vedic scholars are called Vedantists. These so-called followers of Vedanta philosophy consider the absolute truth to be impersonal. They also believe that a person born in a particular caste cannot change his caste until he dies and takes rebirth. The Smarta Brahmanas also reject the fact that Mahaprasadam, food offered to the deity, is transcendental and materially uncontaminated. Originally, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was subjected to all the rules and regulations of the Vedic principles on the mundane platform. Now, Gopinathacharya pointed out how Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had been converted by the causeless mercy of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Being converted, Sarvabhauma took prasadam with the Vaishnavas. Indeed, he sat by the side of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. And one thing you have to understand about the relationship of Gopinathacharya with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Gopinathacharya was the brother-in-law of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So he had a very close relationship. He could tease Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Previously, he was always teasing Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya before Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Jagannath Puri. He would tease him for his impersonalism, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya took it in stride because, from your brother-in-law, you have a nice, loving, sometimes teasing relationship. But now Gopinathacharya is pointing out, I was right and you were wrong. There's a certain satisfaction in pointing that out to people later on that, hey, I was right all along. You were wrong. And so this is part of the loving relationship between him and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Sarvabhauma kahe, karkika ku buddhi, tomara prasade mora e sempat siddhi. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya replied to Gopinathacharya, I was simply a less intelligent logician, but by your grace I have received this opulence of perfection. Mahaprabhu bina keha nahi daya maya kakere garudakare achikon haya. But for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya continued, who is so merciful he has converted a crow into a Garuda. Who could be so merciful? So, of course, this is the same thing as saying, Om Gana Tamiranda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur and Militam Yena Tasmai Shigurave Namaha, which we say at the beginning of every class, which means I was ignorant or born in the darkness of ignorance. And by the mercy of my spiritual master, who has enlightened me with a torchlight of knowledge, I am now out of ignorance. So the spiritual master, another example given by Rupa Goswami, is that by the proper application of different substances to mercury, alchemy, utilizing alchemy, mercury can become transformed to gold. In other words, that's called alchemy. So by the proper application of the process of bhakti yoga, specifically chanting the Lord's holy names, the bell metal, because it's actually mercury on bell metal that transforms something to gold. By the proper application of bhakti yoga on the consciousness of a materially engrossed person, the person's consciousness can be transformed into Krishna consciousness. So that's really what he's saying right here. Karikika Sri Gala Sange Bhovo Kari Se Mukevi Sadakai Krishna Hori. In the association of the jackals known as logicians, I simply continued to bark a resounding blah, blah. It's like a sheep, I guess. Now from the same mouth I am chanting the holy names Krishna and Hari. Kahan Bahimuka Tarkika Shishyagana Sange Kahane Sangha Sudha Samudra Tarange. Whereas I once associated with the disciples of logic, all non-devotees, I am now merged in the waves of the nectarian ocean of the association of devotees. As Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains, the word Bhadhimukha refers to a person who is very busy tasting material enjoyment. Such a person always poses himself as an enjoyer of the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Being attracted by the external opulence, the non-devotee always forgets his intimate relationship with Krishna. Such a person does not like the idea of becoming Krishna conscious. This is explained by Srila Prahlad Maharaj in Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto, 5th chapter, text 30 to 31. This is actually a famous compilation of the verses. Actually, I know these verses. Mathirna Krishnai Paratas Vamito Bitpadyeta Graha Vratanam Adanda Gopir Vishatam Damishram Punak Punascharvita Charvananam Natevidu Swartagatirmi Vishnum Darashya Yebhiratarmanina Andayatanda Upaniyamanas Depishatantra Muratam Nibada. Materialists who are overly attracted to the material body, material world, and material enjoyment, who cannot control the material senses, are carried to the darkest regions of material existence. Such people cannot become Krishna conscious either by themselves or by congregational effort. So that's the first verse. Matir na Krishna. The one who has decided they don't want Krishna, paratos vatova, they can get all sorts of good association or education or whatever. Graha vratanam. They've taken a vow of enjoyment in the material world, their determination. Maybe they haven't taken a formal vow, I'm going to enjoy the material world, but their determination is to enjoy the material world. Adandagopir Tamishram. Adandagopir, let me just go back to this one. Vishatam Tamishram. So Adanta, Gopir, they have uncontrolled senses and enter into ignorance. And what do they do in ignorance? Punas, chewing the already chewed. In other words, they try to do something over and over and over again that hasn't gotten anyone in the material world success. And charvita charvadanam, they keep chewing it. Again and again, they keep chewing it. Or in common language, that's chewing the already chewed. Okay. And that's what we do in this material world. We chew the already chewed. And Einstein, as I've often quoted him, has said, insanity means to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. So if you look at history, all these people who tried to enjoy, all these people who tried to live longer, they all died and they all suffered. Tough nookies. Such people do not understand that the goal of life for a human being is to understand the Supreme Personality of God and Vishnu. A human life is especially meant for this purpose, and one has to go through all kinds of penances and austerities and set aside the propensity for sense gratification. That's a hard one. Materialists always remain blind because they're always guided by blind rascals. A materialistic person considers himself free to act as he likes. He does not know that he is rigidly controlled by the stringent laws of nature, nor does he know that he has to transmigrate from one body to another and perpetually rot in material existence. He doesn't know his real self-interest. Natevadhu swarti gatimhi Vishnu. They don't know what their real self-interest is. Such rascals and foolish people are lured by the prayers of their foolish leaders for sense grayad, and they cannot understand what is meant by Krishna consciousness. The material world exists outside the spiritual sky, and a foolish materialist cannot estimate the extent of this material sky. What then can he know of the spiritual sky? Materialists simply believe, their imperfect senses and do not take instruction from the revealed scriptures. According to the Vedic civilization, one has to see through the authority of the revealed scriptures. Shastra Chakshahu, One should see everything through the medium of Vedic literature. In this way, one can distinguish between the spiritual and material world. Those who ignore such instructions cannot be convinced of the existence of the spiritual world because they have forgotten their spiritual identity. Such materialists take this material world as the all and all, therefore they are called Bahirmukha. Technically, the word Bahirmukha means to look or turn your face outside. In other words, to look outside. Or to reject Krishna. That's the point. Andar yatanda rupat niyamanas tepyashat tanta murdami bada. They are blind people, and who's leading them? Other blind people. And according to the Bhagavatam, they both fall into a little ditch. Prabhu kahe purve sira Krishna tamara priti tama sange ama sabara haila Krishna mati. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu said to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, from your previous birth you have been in Krishna consciousness. Thus you love Krishna so much that simply by your association we are all developing Krishna consciousness. Bhakta Mahima Badaite Bhakte Sukadite Mahaprabhu Binanya Nahi Tri Jagate. There is no one within these three worlds save for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who is always so willing to increase the glories of his devotees and give them satisfaction. In this regard, one should consult a discussion between Kapila and Devahuti on the subject matter of devotional service. This is found in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto. Now, really what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying is true. First of all, because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was or is eternally a devotee, he's Brahmaspati. And secondly, if someone takes devotional service up so easily, like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya appeared to have taken it up, just like one little discussion, and that was it, baby. That means in the previous life, they were actually advanced devotees. And we see this oftentimes when we're presenting Krishna consciousness to the public at large. All of a sudden, someone will come along and it's like they're already a devotee, even though they're not chanting at that particular time. They may have been doing so much sinful activities before, activities that are not conducive to spiritual advancement. Let's use that particular word or series of words rather than say sin. Sin sounds so heavy, although we use that sometimes. Activities that are counterproductive to yoga. That's the point. So, even though they may have been doing all these things and seemingly in the darkness of ignorance, they were devotees in their last life. So as soon as they hear the holy names, as soon as they come in touch with the spiritual master, as soon as they read a book, then automatically they take to Krishna consciousness because they are advanced from the previous life. I mean, I had that experience in my own life because I wasn't advanced. I can't say that. But in my own life, I was going along my business, or I wasn't going along my business. Anyway, I was always looking for the absolute truth and never satisfied until what happened? Until I heard the holy name and read Prabhupada's books, and then suddenly it woke something up. Nothing I ever encountered before woke me up like that. I had already become a vegetarian because naturally, according to the Bhagavad Gita, one is naturally attracted to yoga principles. Even before I met Prabhupada, I was sitting in the forest and meditating for many hours and chanting Om for many, many hours. So that's an indication of past life Krishna consciousness. And then as soon as I came in touch with Prabhupada, bingo. Of course, you don't know what bingo means. All of it, instantly, it was just like, oh, okay, here I am, back in Krishna consciousness. And the first time I actually saw devotees dancing around Tulsi Devi. I mean, theoretically, mentally, I didn't really understand what was going on. I just saw people running around a bush and bowing down to some bush. But I felt I had been there many times before, worshipping Tulsi Devi. So you can see actually is through past life experience. It just the spiritual master comes sometimes, like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and says, "Hey, wake up! Don't you remember past life? Don't you remember who you were?" And the disciple says, "Yeah. Thank you, Guru Maharaj, for waking me up." The transcendental alarm clock. It's just like if one has amnesia, just like if one's sleeping. If one's sleeping, one's in ignorance, but one's actual identity or knowledge of one's identity is dormant. So as soon as one wakes up, as long as one is healthy, then one remembers. One may be a little groggy at first when they wake up. You know, sometimes you shake someone up. Wake up, Prabhu. Huh? Huh? Where am I? Let me go back to sleep. I was having a nice dream. Oh, let me continue. You interrupted me right in the middle of the dream where I was being crowned the King of England. Or crowned the Acharya of the Krishna conscious movement or something. So they know. And so the spiritual master is waking us up out of this dream that lasts 100 years, where you're thinking so many things. Jeev Jago, Gora Chanda, Bole. Wake up, sleeping soul. Wake up, sleeping soul. Lord Chaitanya is calling you. So Tabi Prabhu Pratyeke Sava Bhaktera Nama Lana Pita Pana Deo Haila Prasada Kariya. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then took all the remnants of food offered to Jagannath, such as cakes and sweet rice, and distributed them to all the other devotees, calling them individually. How much love he had for the devotees. Advaita Nityananda Vasya Chena Ekatani Dvijane Krida Kalaha Lagila Tatai. Sri Advaita Acharya and Nityananda Prabhu sat side by side, and when prasadam was being distributed, they engaged in a type of mock fighting. So you see this often in the relationship between Advaita Acharya and Lord Nityananda. They start calling each other names. I mean, this is part of their loving exchange. I mean, this happened after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas, and he went to Advaita Acharya's house with Lord Nityananda, and then Advaita Acharya was feeding them something, and Lord Nityananda said, "I hope to break my fast, but this is not even a morsel for me." And Advaita Acharya said, "You know, you're a reject Paramahamsa, just eat." And Lord Nityananda threw the food, and some of it landed on Advaita Acharya. Advaita Acharya started dancing and said, "Now I've been contaminated." So, you know, he had all these types of exchanges between Advaita Acharya and Lord Nityananda, which were really interesting, really interesting friendship relationships. Sometimes there's teasing, sometimes there's anger and mock fighting. So now you're going to hear about something. Advaita kahe avadutera sange eka pankti bhojana karilu na jani habe kon gati. First, Advaita Acharya said, "I'm sitting in line with an unknown mendicant, and because I'm eating with him, I do not know what kind of destination is awaiting me." In other words, I'm getting really bad association with this guy who's sitting next to me. And that's Lord Nityananda. And Lord Nityananda is God. Advaita Acharya is God. Lord Chaitanya is God. They're all the same person acting differently in different circumstances at the same time. Unbelievable. When we've talked about this many times before. Prabhu ta sannyasi unhara nahi apachaya anadoshe sannyasira doshanahi haya. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is in the renounced order of life, consequently he does not recognize discrepancies. As a matter of fact, the sannyasi is not affected by eating food from anywhere and everywhere. Nana doshena maskari e shastra pramana amita grahasta brahmana amara doshastana. According to the shastras, there's no discrepancy in a sannyasi eating in another's house. But for a household of Brahmana, this kind of eating is faulty. He's saying, it's faulty for me to be sitting next to Lord Nityananda and eating at the same time and sharing food with him. It's contaminating. It's such a funny exchange he's having with Lord Nityananda. Janmakula silachara najani yahara Tara Sange Eka Pankti Bada Anachara. It is not proper for householders to dine with those whose previous birth, family, character, and behavior are unknown. That's Lord Nityananda. Nityananda Kahi Tumi Advaita Charya Advaita Sirante Bhade Shuddha Bhakti Karya. Nityananda Prabhu immediately refuted Sri Advaita Acharya, saying, "You are a teacher of impersonal monism," and the monistic conclusion, that means, just like monism means liberation, which is merging into the existence of the Lord. And the monistic conclusion is a great hindrance to progressive, pure devotional service. Tomara Siddhanta Sangha Kareye Jane Ekavastuvina Se Dvitiya Nahi Mane. One who participates in your impersonal, monistic philosophy does not accept anything but the one Brahman. In other words, you don't accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. You're an atheist, Prabhu. This is really, it's really funny how Lord Nityananda is dealing with Advaita Acharya, and Advaita Acharya is dealing with him. So he's not an impersonal, Advaita Acharya is not an impersonal monist, but he was acting as one before he met Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The impersonal monist does not believe that God is the only object of worship, and that living entities are his eternal servants. According to the monist, God and the devotees, and the devotee may be separate in the material state, but when they're spiritually situated, there's no difference between them. This is called the Advaita Siddhanta. Advaita means non-dual conclusion, the conclusion of the monist. Monists consider devotional service to the Lord to be a material activity, therefore they consider such devotional activities to be the same as karma, or fruit of activity. This monistic mistake is a great stumbling block on the road to devotional service. Actually, this discussion between Advaita Acharya and Nityananda was a mock fight to serve as a great instruction for all devotees. Sri Nityananda Prabhu wanted to point out that Advaita Acharya, a pure devotee, did not agree with the monistic conclusion. The conclusion of devotional service is Vedanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yad jnanam advayam prameti paramatmeti bhagavan iti sabhyate. And I'll paraphrase this right after I read the translation. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. Bhagavatam 1-11. So what that means is Brahman, or the greatest, has three different aspects to it. The personal aspect, the localized aspect, and the impersonal aspect. Or the example that Srila Prabhupada would often give is Prabhupada's example, that you have the sunshine. The sunshine is spread everywhere, at least when it's daytime. Anyway, so it's spread everywhere. I'm looking outside. I see the sun in terms of the sunshine. The sun is coming into my room. It's the sunshine. It's spread everywhere. When I say everywhere, this is just an example to help us understand. It's spread everywhere. So that everywhere being spread is equivalent in this particular metaphor to the impersonal Brahman. Okay? And then the Paramatma, okay? Paramatma is the actual, just comparing it. It's not, it's a metaphor that all points are exactly the same, to the sun disk. The sun globe, the sun disk. Okay. And then the Bhagavan is the person who controls the sun, the deity of the sun, formally known as, not formally known as Vivaswan, the sun god. Okay. So Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. So there's different aspects of the same thing. Another example Prabhupada gave was the electricity comes from the powerhouse, which is like an impersonal thing. And there's a powerhouse that produces the electricity, but there's a person operating the powerhouse. Another example. Just helps. Those examples don't prove the point, they just help us understand the difference between Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, and actually being part of the same substance or process. It's even better, process. Absolute knowledge consists of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, understanding those three aspects. This conclusion is not the same as that of the monist. Srila Advaita Acharya was given the title of Acharya because he spread the bhakti cult, not the philosophy of monism. The true conclusion of Advaita Siddhanta, expressed at the very beginning of Caitanya Caritamrta in the Adi Lila 1.3, is not the same as the philosophy of the monists. Here, Advaita Siddhanta means Advaya Jnana, or oneness in variety. Wow. Actually, Sri Nityananda Prabhu was praising Srila Advaita Acharya through friendly mock fighting. He was giving the Vaishnava conclusion in terms of the Bhagavatam's conclusive words, Vedanti Tat Tattva Vida, which is the same thing as saying Achincha Beta Veda Tattva, one and different simultaneously. Wow. This is also the conclusion of a mantra in the Chandogya Upanishad, Ekam Ekadvitiyam. Very, very interesting. A devotee knows that there is oneness in diversity. That's Achincha, Beta, Abeta, Tattva. That is, the truth is that there is oneness, inconceivable, oneness and difference simultaneously. And actually, interesting, Prabhupada wanted us in this movement. We had a discussion with someone today that was very interesting. Prabhupada wanted us in this movement to discuss on a social or an institutional basis unity in diversity, which is the same thing, but on a personal basis. Or let me explain what Prabhupada meant. That we are all persons. We are all devotees. Hopefully there's all devotees in the Hare Krishna movement. Anyway, so we are all devotees, and we are all dedicated to the mission of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. We are all dedicated to Srila Prabhupada's service. That's the unity. What is the diversity? We have different talents. We have different ways of applying Krishna consciousness. For example, sometimes it's termed liberal, conservative, orthodox. What does that mean? A liberal person who's presenting Krishna consciousness may not dress all the time in a dhoti, and the external appearance may be different, but he still has faith in the holy name, presents the holy name, presents the Srimad Bhagavatam, presents the holy name, presents the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, but like Prabhupada said, old wine in new bottles. That example was used by Prabhupada in many, many different circumstances. And someone who was orthodox or conservative, the external aspects of their presentation are basically the same as those that have been done throughout at least a certain amount of history. So that's the difference. And there's cultural differences too. There's ways of understanding things. People have different cultural ways of saying things according to the way they were brought up. Language influences psychology. And so there's a diversity in the Krishna consciousness movement. A lot of diversity in the Krishna consciousness movement, and we've seen this. And so that is a challenge in managing this society. That's why Prabhupada said one of the businesses of the GBC, perhaps even the most important business of the GBC when they meet, or when we meet, because I'm a member, is to discuss unity in diversity. What is the unifying factor, and how to respect the diversity within certain limits. In other words, you don't want diverse things like some devotee teaching when you chant Hare Krishna, smoking marijuana really helps you concentrate. That's too diverse. So there's limitations to diversity. And those limitations have to be spelled out. And certain concepts of philosophical limitations are expressed by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in what he called the Dasha Mula. That means the 10 basic philosophical points. Those weren't really points so much in the execution of Krishna consciousness, although there's some general hint in the Dasha Mula. But These were points in the philosophy or tattvas. Tattva means basically not precisely, but it means truth, something that is irrevocable, and irrevocable truth, basically. Something that is, something that doesn't change with time. That's what a tattva is. So, anyway, but diversity is very important, not only on the philosophical basis, but also on the cultural basis. And devotees have to see the inherent, when they're dealing with each other, see the inherent sincerity, dedication to, at least in the Krishna conscious movement, to His divine grace, Srila Prabhupada, and appreciate that person's devotion, although you may not appreciate that person's strategy or strategies. And that is a challenge, I tell you that. It's a major, major challenge in the Krishna consciousness movement. Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong key. To appreciate the unity and not get confused by the diversity, and to understand the limits of the diversity. There are limits, but it's not as limited as you may think, or as the Orthodox or conservative people think. But sometimes you have people very liberal who push the envelope and maybe push a little bit beyond the limits. So the GBC has to define, or the leaders of society have to define the limits of that diversity, and also encourage the culture of respect for that diversity. Anyway, very important. The mantras of the Shastras do not support, so we're talking on a society basis now, or a social basis, rather than the philosophical conclusions, but anyway, they're both important. The mantras of the Shastras do not support the monistic conclusions of the impersonalists, nor does Vaishnava philosophy accept impersonalism without variety. Brahman is the greatest, that's what Brahman means. He who includes everything, and that is oneness. As Krishna, and so Brahman actually has variety. There's an undifferentiated aspect of Brahman and a differentiated aspect of Brahman. What do I mean by that? That you have Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then you have Krishna's energy. So, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7:7, Matak Taram Nanyat, there is no one superior to Krishna himself. He is the original substance because every category emanates from him. He is the Shaktiman, that means the source of all the energies. Thus, he is simultaneously one with and different from all other categories. The Lord is always engaged in a variety of spiritual activities, but the manas cannot understand spiritual variety. The conclusion is that although the powerful and the power are one and the same in the energy of the powerful, there are varieties. In those varieties, there's a distinction between the different parts of one's personal self, between types of the same category, and between types of different categories. In other words, there's a lot of varieties. There's varieties in Krishna's manifestations of his avatars, that is Vishnu Tattva avatars, or Shakti Tattva avatars. There's variety. There has to be variety. Because where would the variety in this world come from if there wasn't variety in the source of this world, which is the spiritual realm, or Brahman? In other words, there's always variety in the categories which are understood as knowledge, the knower, and the knowable. Due to the eternal existence of knowledge, the knower, and the knowable. So, this is actually dealt with in the Gita. Devotees everywhere know about the eternal existence of the form, name, qualities, pastimes, and entourage. That means the Lord's gang. That's actually a fancy word for those people who go with the Lord on his tour, entourage, with the Lord on his touring to different universes and in the spiritual world of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Devotees never agree with the manas preaching of oneness unless one understands to the conception of the knower, the knowable, and the knowledge. There's no possibility of understanding spiritual variety, nor can one taste the transcendental bliss of spiritual variety. Let's see how long this purport is. Wow. Oh no, we can finish it. So the question and answer period is going to be a little shorter. The philosophy of monism is an adjustment of the Buddhist philosophy of voidism. In a mock fight with Sri Advaitacharya Sri Nityananda Prabhu, was refuting this type of monistic philosophy. Vaishnavas certainly accept Lord Sri Krishna as the ultimate one, and that which is without Krishna is called Maya, or that which has no existence, because everything is connected to Krishna. Vatevatam na pratyeta chatmani tadvidyadatmanomayam yatabasha yatatamaha. The definition of Maya, or illusion, or that which has no existence, is something seen without relationship to Krishna. Actually, everything has a relationship to Krishna. And even, the funny thing is, here's the real funny thing, that even one's thinking that something has no relationship to Krishna, that thinking has some relationship to Krishna. Why am I saying that? Because Krishna says, Krishna is giving one intelligence, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So if you're thinking that something has no relationship with Krishna, that thought process, that intelligence to come up with that thought process is coming from Krishna. So even you are thinking of something that is untrue, that thinking process is connected to Krishna. So everything is connected with Krishna. How about that one? External Maya is exhibited in two phases: Jiva Maya, the living entities, and Guna Maya, the material world. In the material world, there's Prakriti, material nature, and Pradhana, the ingredients of material nature. Pradhana is the unmanifested stage of the three modes of material nature. And the material nature comes into form or manifests itself when the Lord looks at the Pradhana through his glance, Saikshata, and that glance is Shambhu. Anyway, that's in the Brahma Samhita. So Krishna is connected with that too. Krishna is connected to the Pradhana, the Prakriti, he's the material cause, the spiritual cause. He's the cause of all causes, Sarva Karana Karanama. However, for one who becomes Krishna conscious, the distinction between material and spiritual varieties does not exist. An advanced devotee like Prahlad Maharaj sees everything as one Krishna. It's all Krishna's energies. And it's all acting properly. Of course, this is the process, or this is the consciousness of a Mahabhagavat, which I don't happen to be. So I see a difference. So, but for Mahabhagavat, everything is going according to plan. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 7.4.37, Krishna Graha Grahitatma Naveda Jagadish Idrasham. One who is in full Krishna consciousness does not distinguish between things material and spiritual. He takes everything to be related to Krishna and therefore spiritual. Not only does he see things like that, but he acts in that way. That's called Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagya Muchate. What does that mean? That his renunciation is to see everything connected to Krishna, and he uses it all in Krishna's service. Panchakataya Bhujya Harisambandha Bhashana Mumukshapuri Mukshabi Purityagi Vairagyu Falgum Katyate. That if one doesn't see like that, that's called false renunciation. So, in other words, therefore everything is spiritual because it belongs to Krishna. Aham Sarvasya Prabhu. There's so many different statements like that. Yomam Pashati Sarvatra. One should see Krishna in everything and everywhere, because it's all Krishna's property. It's all meant for the same purpose. Just like the different divisions of the government. Here's an example Prabhupada gave. The different divisions of the government. There's the prison division, and there is the, judicial division. They're all divisions of the government. So you should see the government acting, hopefully, for the benefit of the citizens. By Advaya Jnana Darshana, Shri Advaita Acharya has glorified pure devotional service. Srila Nityananda Prabhu herein sarcastically condemns the philosophy of impersonal manas and praises the correct non-dual philosophy of Shri Advaita Prabhu, one and different simultaneously. So, I think we will end here. We did 177 to 195 tonight. I'm going to mark it down. And, oh my God, it's late already. Let's take a few minutes for perfect questions, perfect answers, or perfect or imperfect questions and perfect answers, as the case may be. Let's unmute you. Let's take the bandages off your mouth so you can ask a question. If you like, so you can type your question or you can unmute yourself. Madhva, you have a question.
Danvat Pranam, Gurudev. So my question is, when you are talking about material and spiritual, actually really seen one, but then why it is looked down? This is material, this is spiritual. Then why is distinction?
Why is the distinction? The distinction is there because we fall into illusion. That's why the distinction is there. And because we are in illusion right now, we have to act in such a way to discriminate between different aspects of the material creation in terms of what to do, what not to do. That's why we're, as second class devotees, Madhyama Adhikaris, we have to be very, very careful about our association. The Madhyama Adhikari has to be avoiding those who are envious. A Madhyama Adhikari has to approach those who are innocent, make friendship with the devotees, and ultimately worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we have to make distinctions because we're not at that platform. But for someone who's at that platform, Vishvam Purna Shukayate, then the whole universe is actually blissful because he sees the purpose behind everything connected to Krishna. And ultimately, an Uttama Adhikari sees everyone as serving Krishna. Of course, some people are serving Krishna voluntarily, some people are serving Krishna involuntarily, under the jurisdiction of the modes of material nature. But an Uttama Adhikari doesn't preach. However, he understands, this is a really important distinction, an Uttama Adhikari understands that those who are serving Krishna involuntarily are suffering. So in order to alleviate their suffering, he does understand that. He does understand certain distinctions. It's not that he's blind to knowing when someone is an illusion and someone is not an illusion. But he sees Krishna's things going on according to Krishna's plan. And therefore, what he does is he steps down from the consciousness or position. He's still an Uttamanadhikari, but he steps down from the acting in that particular position out of compassion to help those who are suffering in this material world. And that's like someone like Srila Prabhupada, who steps down. He sees, as an Uttamadhikari, you see everything is going according to plan. If you looked at, if you had a perfectly functioning government, you would see that everything is going according to plan. The prisoners are in the prison house. They're making roads, like in the United States. Many of the roads were constructed by prisoners utilizing what they used to call chain gangs. They would chain all the prisoners together, especially the roads in Florida were constructed like that. And the prisoners would do work for the government or make license plates or something. So you see that, things are going nicely, prisons arranged very nicely like that. But a Uttamadhikari with compassion sees that the prisoners are not really happy or free. So therefore, let me help them come to the right platform of consciousness. So he steps down, rather than just admiring how the government is functioning nicely, he'll step down and say, let me work to try to rectify these prisoners so they can get out of prison. So Uttamadhikari is also absorbed internally in his ras and his relationship with Krishna. So he's experiencing so much joy within. He's one of the gopis or a cowherd boy or something like that. And everything is going according to plan. It's Krishna's arrangement. But still out of compassion, he decides to help us. And that's really great compassion. I mean, you can imagine if you were in a situation where you internally, you're with Krishna in the spiritual world. Let's say in the spiritual world, okay, Goloka Vrindavan. You're in the spiritual world, and you're dancing with Krishna, or you're a parent of Krishna or something, and you're just like in complete ecstasy. It would be hard to think compassionately about those who were suffering in the material world. I mean, for example, let's say, for example, Janmashtami. Okay, devotees are in Janmashtami. I mean, let's say I experienced that. I mean, just theoretically. Let's say Janmashtami, I was doing arti for Radhagolokananda, and devotees were dancing, chanting ecstasy, and I don't know if I was in ecstasy, but let's say theoretically, I was. let's say theoretically, I was in ecstasy. You know, theoretically, you know, it's probably just thinking when is the prasadam. But anyway, so in any case, let's say theoretically, I was in ecstasy offering arti to the deities, and the devotees were dancing. Very hard to think about the suffering people in this world. It's very hard. You're just thinking, wow, this is ecstatic Janmashtami, and then there's prasadam afterwards. Of course, my prasadam was just basically kasha. I know that would aggravate certain people on this call. My so it was the same thing I eat every other day, 24 hours, not 24 hours a day, it's, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So it was exactly the same thing. So, but anyway, let's say I was just in ecstasy like that. How would I think? It would be very difficult to think of the poor conditioned souls who were suffering. But someone like Prabhupada is thinking like that. I'm just contrasting or trying to give us a vague idea of how an Uttama Adhikari feels and how much compassion he must have to step down to deal with us. I mean, that takes a lot of compassion. You're in complete ecstasy. You're experiencing all the different bhavas. We have Achari bhavas, all 33 of them, or at least one of them, or a few of them at the same time. And you're dancing in ecstasy, and you're just like, wow, it's overwhelming. Like waves of ecstasy are overcoming you. It's very hard to think of compassionately of someone else. Just like, let me give an example. Let's say someone is absorbed, a little kid is absorbed in playing video games, and his parents come home and they say, I need some help. It's very hard. The kid's just like, later, just stay away. So with someone like Prabhupada, he's actually just not saying later. He's putting himself in a position of having to deal with us, which is amazing. I mean, you try to understand that comparison. It's simply amazing for an Uttama Adhikari to have so much compassion, because they have compassion naturally, but someone like Prabhupada to have so much compassion just to refocus on us out of compassion and step down and make that distinction between the envious, the innocent, the devotees, and the Supreme Personality God for our benefit. For our benefit, because Uttama Adhikari is Vishvam Purna Shukayate, is always experiencing happiness. So, Mr. Cohen, you have a question.
Thank you, Maharaj. Dandavat.
Okay, last question will be Mr. Gopal Cohen.
Thank you,
nice.
David. So my obeisances.
Nice, Mr. Gopal Cohen. I didn't know people who were born in Jewish families got Krishna conscious names. Anyway.
Zagazon Korea.
Happy New Year.
Okay. So we're talking about compassion and also absorption. So the devotees are absorbed in all the different bhavas, and then for those devotees who come to preach, they find that everyone here is absorbed in material so-called bhavas, where they're suffering, but they can't drag themselves away.
That's right.
So
what do you
it's
do?
difficult sometimes, we see, to distinguish the envious from just, the child.
Yeah.
And it can be, an incredible effort just to distract, let's say, the child from the video games. It can be a monumental effort just to distract the materialist away from what he thinks is either enjoyment or enjoyment just now coming.
Yes. So what's the question? The question is you have to give them the enjoyment of Krishna consciousness in the guise of enjoyment. Or like Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, give them balam ghee with rice on it.
Mm.
You understand what I mean? So that's we have to dovetail things, all right? You want to play a video game? Okay, let's make a Krishna conscious video game for you. Let's play the Ramayana as a video game. So an expert devotee understands how to dovetail someone's enjoyment to spiritualize someone's enjoyment. Just like we have prasadam. I mean, what do people enjoy eating, right? I remember a Janmashtami walking by you, and there you were with a big plate of prasadam. Right?
Not this year, but yeah.
Yeah, big, like this big a plate of prasadam, and you had a big smile on your face.
Back
So,
when I was young and I could digest such things.
so you have to have four people help you carry the plate. It was so big. So there's a big plate of prasadam. So you want to enjoy the tongue. I mean, I'm not criticizing you for it to want to enjoy the tongue. So, but really, we are giving you something so you enjoy your tongue, and you become Krishna conscious at the same time. Oh, he disappeared. He got scared by that example. Okay,
No, sorry, I'm here. I just lowered my hand.
I frightened him. I frightened him off. I'm sorry about that.
If
So,
I'm not frightened by this time, I never will be.
so we enjoy. Anyway, so you dovetail. That's the preaching of Krishna consciousness. Yes, people are immersed, so you let them remain immersed, and you spiritualize that immersion. That's the expert way of bringing people to Krishna consciousness. And by spiritualizing that immersion, just like Valmiki, he was taught to chant Mara, 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 which he liked very much because that meant death, 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 death. So he spiritualized his, let's say, ghastly rasa, death, 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 and it became Mara, Mara, Mara. So that's what Prabhupada's doing with us, and that's how we engage people in Krishna consciousness.
So
Okay.
if we are not so expert at this time through prayer and practice, will we be able to develop that expertise?
Yes, but you got to practice and you got to have good sadhana. Got to wake up early and wake up the people who are staying with you too.
Yes,
That's
sir.
an inside. That's an inside joke. Inside joke. Yes, but they wake up for prasadam. I mean, at least it's something's better than nothing. But what can I say? Set a good example. Example is better than precept. Okay, gotta go. See everybody later. See everybody tomorrow. All glories to